Dr. Rajan Prasad.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm really glad that that member did not stay a member of the Labour Party. He deserves to be in that party. And just to take up two of his points, Mr. Speaker, the number of people on DPB under this government, the last government rather, actually went down the first time since the DPB was introduced. And that member says we did nothing. Well, that's one fact. The second point, the member might like to recall that this government, the last government rather, worked so hard, Mr. Speaker, to get the unemployment rate down, and it was the lowest in the OECD. So there's plenty that the last government did to address the needs of every citizen in New Zealand society. Mr. Speaker, no matter how much this government dresses the provisions of this bill as representing its focus on fairness and on unrelenting focus on work, it is actually another example of this government's punitive approach to the most vulnerable in our society. That's what it is. There are many other examples in the bills that have come through this House, brought together, Mr. Speaker, by that government, and this is another one. It could have been a great opportunity to actually provide for this minister to actually focus on fairness and to focus on work if she really wanted to. But she didn't do that. She was not up to it, and therefore the sadness about this third reading debate is that it's a lost opportunity. And the government was never interested in that, but it now comes to the House and says that is its agenda. Well, how come then nobody believes them? Nobody believes them. This government has really internalized, Mr. Speaker, and has been driven by, if we think about it, the views of those who believe beneficiaries are unfairly receiving state assistance. That's the rhetoric and those are the beliefs that those members opposite and this government, Mr. Speaker, have internalized. And this is the reason for this kind of punitive approach to welfare reform. They also believe that the lives of those who receive assistance should not be easy. We should make it difficult for them, and that they should be expected to continually prove that they are deserving of the assistance the state provides. And it goes back to the charity organisation society days of the deserving and the undeserving poor. The only one step after that, give them bread and circus. They really demonstrate, those who argue for this bill, any in-depth understanding of the lived experiences of many beneficiaries. And indeed, Mr. Garrett was a case in point, and he has done that a number of times in this House, Mr. Speaker. There's no reason to really begin to use the kinds of names that member uses for this group of people. I think he ended up by saying that it was like they were diseased. It was like a disease. A member did say that. And that the belief was that this was like a disease, and disease what they had got into.
David Garrett.
I take offence to that, Mr. Speaker. At no time did I say that beneficiaries were diseased. I said that welfareism was a disease. It's a very different thing.
That's actually a point of debate. It is not a point of order, and there are other mechanisms the member has. Rajan Prasad.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the member's language does demonstrate, Mr. Speaker, his contempt for this group of people. The member's thoughts were that this group should be like some others he quoted from the islands. They should make their own clothes. Well, that's the bread and circus argument, Mr. Garrett. We're not taking New Zealand back to that kind of experience. Mr. Speaker, at every stage of this bill, this side of the House has tried to bring some balance to the issues that the government faces in what it proposes in this bill. But at no point has the government started to listen to what was said. In the Select Committee stage, hardly anybody spoke in support of the changes affecting the unemployed and those on DPB. And these were not just anybody. Annette King went through those submissions in some details. These were respectable organisations that ministered to our most vulnerable. And it was their considered opinion that said this bill does not address the needs of the most vulnerable in our society. They said that they will make their situations much worse. And the Honourable Annette King listed the kinds of thoughts that they had, that this bill was discriminatory. It will actually increase poverty, was what we were told. It will actually affect children. It increases the chances of violence within our families. We fight against them in other programs, but here we are passing another set of rules that will make it worse. So they have not considered, this bill has not considered the perverse effects of these provisions on the important role of sole parents bringing up children. Government was not listening, it knew best. Mr. Speaker, the government's approach to fairness is interesting. And it does not mean, as it does for this side of the House, providing an adequate income for those who are bringing up our children on their own, and so that they may be provided with the best opportunity to provide the best environment. That would be fair if we really focused on that. The fairness means not subjecting mothers, mainly mothers they are, to the frustrations of access to childcare. It means opening up opportunities for them to undertake training and education so that they may actually prepare themselves, Mr. Speaker, for re-entering the workforce when their children require less of their time and when they can gain employment that provides them with an adequate income. Fairness on this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, means balancing the negative views of beneficiaries that some hold in society and members opposite reflect, with a plan to give every New Zealander the opportunity to make a valued contribution to our society. It's another example of where the government does not have a comprehensive plan. It kind of goes along one dimension, hoping that it will do the work. This is another example of that lack of plan, lack of principle, and it's really wolf whistle politics that we see. In the third reading debate, one national member asked, what is wrong about expecting a sole parent when the children are 6 years old to take on some work? I said to that member, there is nothing wrong with that expectation, provided we have taken into account all that a solo parent has to do to provide good care for their children, to do single-handedly what many of us struggle with as two parents, and as we struggle with two parents and more financial resources, and to factor in those who are taking courses to prepare themselves when their children require less of their time to enter the job market, and those who provide a significant amount of volunteer work that keeps our schools, our communities, and our recreational opportunity programs and other vulnerable people supported. Mr. Speaker, these provisions do not take into account the real experiences of those people. It gives enormous powers to case managers to make decisions, and the only criteria really, that the fallback criteria will be, have they got work? And then the punitive regime kicks in. If the government adopted our definition of suitable work, and if it did, I would take the government's intentions seriously, that they're actually sincere. Now, there are sole parents on benefits bringing up children who the youngest one has just gone to school, and they could well be preparing themselves through night school, etc. And also doing the volunteer work that our communities depend on, in our schools, in our old people's homes, in our recreational programs, in our churches. That work is work. That is real work. It's not just sitting down, as Mr. Garrett says, watching television in the afternoon. Now, if our SOP recommended that be counted at work as reasonable work, the only difference there, if it was paid, it would be work. But it isn't. It is valuable work. But there was not even a moment's consideration on the part of the government and the minister to actually take that into account. Mr. Speaker, the case has been made. We're sending people to work when there is no work, when it's quite difficult. Mr. Speaker, this is a sad moment, having worked with many of these people, that here was an opportunity to really do something useful, but what the government has come up with is another set of punitive measures which will be used to actually punish those who provide valuable care for our children and for our communities. Thank you.